Taeyang had learned, over the past 8 months, exactly 3 things about dating Abina Carter that had nothing to do with airlines, boardrooms, or committee reports. 1. She could not be bribed with expensive gifts, but she could absolutely be bribed with plantain chips. 2. She still, 8 months in, refused to let him order for her at restaurants. On principle. Even when he genuinely just wanted her to try something. 3. She had, without ever once discussing it formally, started leaving a toothbrush at his apartment, then a second pair of shoes, then, somewhat alarmingly for a man who had spent his entire adult life curating a minimalist penthouse, an entire drawer. He was thinking about all 3 of these facts on a Tuesday evening. Standing in his kitchen, attempting for the 4th time to make her a proper packed lunch for tomorrow's early flight, using a recipe he'd found online titled, with what he now suspected was deeply misplaced confidence, Easy Jollof Rice for Beginners. It was not easy. Taeyang, Abina's voice carried across the kitchen from the doorway, equal parts amused and horrified. Is that smoke? It's not smoke, Taeyang said, staring into the pot with the particular grim determination of a man who had once negotiated a 12 billion won merger without flinching, now genuinely unsure how to proceed against rice. It's concentrated flavor. That is smoke, Abina said, crossing the kitchen and calmly turning off the burner, lifting the lid to reveal something that bore, at best, a distant, tragic resemblance to jollof rice. Baby, what did you do? I followed the recipe. Did you? Abina said, peering into the pot with the expression of a woman viewing a crime scene. I may have, Taeyang admitted, adjusted the pepper ratio. Upward, considerably. How considerably? I doubled it. Then I got nervous it wasn't enough, and doubled it again. Abina stared at him for a long moment, then burst out laughing the real, unguarded laugh he'd fallen for 8 months earlier, standing in an airplane aisle, watching her hand a stolen first-class chocolate to a crying child. You quadrupled the pepper, she said, wiping her eyes, in a beginner recipe. I wanted it to taste like yours, Taeyang said, with the particular wounded dignity of a man whose grand romantic gesture had gone catastrophically wrong. You always say restaurant jollof is never spicy enough. For me, Abena said. I have been eating pepper since before I could walk, Taeyang. You once cried at a level 2 spice rating. That was one time. It was memorable. He pulled her closer despite the ongoing smoke situation, despite the ruined pot, despite 8 months of very clearly established fact that he would never, under any circumstances, master her grandmother's recipe. I just wanted to do something nice, he said, quieter now. You've been working double shifts all week for the committee rollout. I wanted you to have something good tomorrow, not vending machine sandwiches again. Something in Abina's expression softened completely, the teasing giving way to genuine warmth. You're ridiculous, she said. You're a literal billionaire. You could buy the airline a 5-star chef. I wanted to make it myself. I know, Abina said, kissing him briefly, still laughing slightly. Which is exactly why I'm not letting anyone replace this drawer of failed jollof attempts with a chef. It's oddly endearing, watching you lose repeatedly to rice. His phone buzzed on the counter, interrupting the moment. Taeyang glanced at it, and something in his expression shifted immediately surprise. Then a careful, complicated stillness Abina had learned, over 8 months, to recognize as significant. What is it? She asked. My mother, Taeyang said slowly, staring at the message. She wants to have dinner. This weekend. With both of us. Abina went very still. Both of us, she repeated. As in, she knows I exist. She's known for months, Taeyang admitted. I told her after the committee announcement. She hasn't said much about it, until now. What does she want? Abina asked. Something careful entering her own voice now. Taeyang looked at the message again, reading it a 3rd time, as though the words might rearrange themselves into something less significant. I don't know, he said honestly. But my mother doesn't request formal dinners for casual reasons. Abina, whatever this is, I think it's important. Welcome, everyone new here. Or, back for more of Taeyang and Abina. Either way, I'm so glad you're watching. Drop your city or country below, always love that. Now this one's different from what you're used to. No danger this time, I promise. Just love, laughter, and one dinner that's about to test everything these two have built. Stick around, because Taeyang's mother does not do anything by accident. Subscribe if you don't want to miss it. Okay, let's find out what she actually wants. Abina spent the following 3 days in a state of carefully managed panic that she refused, on principle, to fully admit to. I'm not nervous, she told her sister Ajoa over the phone, while simultaneously trying on her 4th outfit of the evening. I'm simply being thorough. You've tried on 4 outfits and called me twice about earrings, Ajoa said, deeply unhelpful. That's nervous, Abina, own it. His mother is the head of one of the most powerful families in Korea, Abina said. I'm allowed to be thorough. You handed her son a stolen first-class chocolate before you even knew who he was, Ajoa said. You survived a public scandal, a board meeting, a tabloid smear campaign, and a court case, and you're panicking about a dinner? This is different, Abina said, and even she wasn't entirely sure how to explain why. The truth, which she hadn't fully admitted even to Taeyang, was that every previous crisis in their relationship had at least given her something concrete to fight against, a lie to correct, a scandal to survive, a threat to face down. This was different. This was simply a mother, deciding, quietly and privately, whether the woman her son loved actually belonged in his life. There was no fighting that. There was only, terrifyingly, being herself, and hoping it was enough. Taeyang, for his part, was handling his own version of nervous energy, considerably less gracefully. You've reorganized your tie draw 3 times, Hae-won observed, watching him from the doorway of his bedroom, with the particular dry amusement of someone who'd worked for him long enough to find his romantic panic genuinely entertaining. This is a new personal record, sir. I don't have a system for this, Taeyang admitted. I've negotiated hostile takeovers with less anxiety than I'm currently experiencing. Might I offer some perspective? Hae-won said. Your mother has met girlfriends before, sir. This isn't unprecedented. She's never requested a formal dinner before, Taeyang said. Not once. Not for anyone. Hae-won's amused expression shifted slightly, understanding settling in. Ah, she said. That is different then, considerably, Taeyang said, abandoning the tie drawer entirely in favor of simply staring at his own reflection with the particular grim intensity of a man facing something genuinely unfamiliar. They arrived at the restaurant, a quiet, elegant space his mother had personally selected, private room, no cameras. No possibility of another public scandal, and Taeyang found his mother already seated, composed and elegant in a way that had, throughout his entire life, made grown board members nervous. Mother, Taeyang said, kissing her cheek. Thank you for arranging this. Sit, Han So-jin said, her sharp eyes moving immediately, thoroughly, to Abina. Both of you. They sat. Abina, Taeyang noted with quiet pride, met his mother's assessing gaze without flinching, offering a polite, steady greeting that carried none of the panic she'd expressed all week to her sister. Miss Carter, Soo-jin said, I've heard a great deal about you. From my son. From the press, eventually, though I found their coverage considerably less thoughtful than his. I hope some of it was accurate, Abina said, something dry entering her own voice, an echo of the same fearless composure that had first caught Taeyang's attention on that flight 8 months ago. Something flickered across Soo-jin's expression, surprise, Taeyang thought, though carefully concealed. Most of it, she said. Though I confess, I invited you both tonight because I wanted to understand something the press coverage never adequately explained. What's that? Abina asked. Why? Soo-jin said, her sharp gaze unwavering. A woman with your evident capability, your clear intelligence, chose to remain a flight attendant for 3 years, rather than pursuing something considerably more ambitious with your talents. Until circumstance and my son's intervention pushed you toward the committee. The question landed in the room with unexpected weight, and Taeyang felt himself tense, uncertain where his mother was actually heading with it. Abina, however, considered it carefully, genuinely, rather than defensively. Because it mattered, she said finally. Not in a way that photographs well or fits neatly into a press profile. But every single day, I got to be the person who noticed when someone was frightened, or grieving, or simply having the worst day of their life at 30,000 feet, and I got to make that moment slightly more bearable for them. That's not nothing, Mrs. Han. Ambition looks different depending on what you actually value. Soo-jin studied her for a long, silent moment, something shifting behind her composed, assessing expression. My son, she said finally, has spent his entire adult life surrounded by people calculating exactly what they could gain from proximity to him. I watched that happen to his father, decades ago, and I have spent 38 years watching it slowly. Quietly happen to Taeyang as well. She paused. I confess, Miss Carter. I invited you tonight expecting to find, eventually, the same calculation underneath your evident charm. I have spent the last 4 minutes listening for it. And? Abina asked, something careful entering her voice now. I haven't found it, Soo-jin said simply. Which is, I want you to understand, considerably rarer and more significant than either of you may currently realize. Taeyong felt something in his chest loosen slightly, though he recognized, watching his mother's expression, that this conversation was far from over. There's something else, So-jin continued, turning to face her son directly now. Something I need to say plainly, Taeyong. Rather than allowing you to simply assume my approval based on tonight's pleasant conversation. What is it? Taeyang asked carefully. The Song family, Soo-jin said, has approached me again. About Hyerin. They believe, given the fading press attention on your unconventional relationship, that there remains an opportunity to reconsider the original alliance. The table went very quiet. Abina felt something cold settle in her chest, though she kept her expression carefully composed, refusing to give either of the Hans the satisfaction of watching her panic in real time. That's not happening, Taeyang said immediately, his voice carrying a firmness that eased some of Abina's tension, though not all of it. I'm not suggesting it should, So-jin said, something almost amused entering her sharp voice. I'm informing you it was proposed, so that you understand exactly what pressures continue to exist around this relationship, Taeyang, whether either of you chooses to acknowledge them or not. Why would you even entertain the conversation? Taeyang asked, if you had no intention of pursuing it. Because, Soo-jin said, turning back to Abina with the particular sharp, assessing attention that made Abina feel, briefly, like she was back in that boardroom facing the ethics committee. I wanted to understand whether my son's commitment to you was genuinely settled, or whether it would waver the moment a more conventionally advantageous option was formally reintroduced. You tested him, Abina said slowly, understanding dawning. Tonight, this whole dinner, you were testing whether he'd waver the moment you mentioned Hyerin. I was testing whether either of you would, Soo-jin corrected. Your reaction just now, Ms. Carter, genuine alarm, followed immediately by composed silence, allowing your partner to answer for himself rather than either panicking or performing confidence you don't actually feel. That told me a great deal as well. Abena sat with this, something complicated moving through her chest relief, mixed uncomfortably with the realization that she'd just been evaluated. Tested in a conversation she hadn't fully understood the stakes of until it was already happening. With respect, Mrs. Han, she said finally, choosing honesty over careful diplomacy. I don't appreciate being tested without my knowledge. I understand you're protecting your son. I understand this family has real reasons for caution, but I am not a hypothesis you get to quietly evaluate over dinner, without my consent, simply because you have the resources and position to arrange it that way. The table went silent again, Taeyang's eyes widening slightly at his girlfriend's directness toward a woman who had, by his own accounting, terrified board members for decades. Soo-jin, however, studied Abina for a long moment, and then, unexpectedly, smiled small, genuine, and considerably warmer than anything Taeyong had witnessed from his mother in recent memory. Good, she said simply. Good? Abina repeated, thrown. You just told the most powerful woman in my family's social circle that her methods were inappropriate. Soo-jin said, directly, without flinching. Despite understanding exactly how much influence I hold over both your relationship and your professional future within this company's orbit. That is precisely the quality I was hoping, and frankly, doubting I would find. Taeyang, watching this entire exchange with growing, bewildered relief, finally found his voice. So this was genuinely a test, he said. The Song family conversation. All of it. Partially, So Jin admitted. The Song family inquiry was genuine, though I had already decided to decline it before tonight's dinner. I simply wanted to observe how both of you handled the pressure of it being raised directly. Unprepared, she turned back to Abina. I apologize for the deception, Miss Carter, though I don't entirely regret the method. I needed to understand, clearly, whether my son had chosen someone capable of surviving this family's particular pressures, rather than someone who would simply, eventually, be worn down by them. Abina exhaled slowly, adrenaline and relief tangling together as the genuine stakes of the evening finally, fully settled. I need a moment, she said, standing, before I say something I might regret to my future mother-in-law. She left for the restroom, and Taeyang watched her go, something warm and slightly stunned still processing through his own system. Future mother-in-law, So Jin repeated. Once Abina was out of earshot, something knowing entering her sharp expression. She said that entirely without hesitation. Taeyang, I noticed. Taeyang said. Something hopeful entering his own voice for the first time all evening. Have you asked her yet? Sujin asked directly. Not yet, Taeyang admitted. I've been waiting for the right moment. Son, Sujin said. Something almost fond entering her usually formal tone. You just watched that woman stand her ground against me. Directly, without a single moment of hesitation. In a conversation with genuinely significant stakes for both of you. I would suggest, strongly, that you stop waiting for a right moment and simply ask her before someone considerably less patient than me decides to test her instead. Taeyang absorbed this, something settling into clear, certain resolve in his chest. Abina returned a few minutes later, composed once more. Though something in her expression suggested she'd spent her brief absence processing considerably more than simply touching up her makeup. I owe you an apology too, Sujin said, once she'd sat back down. For the deception tonight, however necessary I believed it to be. I intend to make it up to you, properly, going forward, if you're both willing to give me the opportunity. I think, Abina said slowly, glancing at Taeyang, something warm entering her own careful composure. We could probably manage that. Though I'd appreciate advance warning before the next test, if there's going to be one. Noted, Sojin said. Something genuinely amused in her voice now. Later that evening, walking Abina to her car, Taeyang found himself standing in the quiet parking lot. Considerably more nervous than he'd felt at any point during dinner with his own mother. That was intense, Abina said, still processing. I genuinely thought, for a solid 2 minutes, that I was about to lose you to an arranged marriage over dinner. Never, Taeyang said immediately, firmly, Abina. There was never a single moment tonight, or in the past 8 months, where losing you was a genuine possibility for me. Something in his voice made Abina pause, studying him more carefully. Taeyang, she said slowly. Why do you look like you're about to say something significant? Because I am, Taeyang said, and reached, with hands considerably steadier than they'd been all week, into his jacket pocket. Abina's breath caught the moment she saw the small velvet box. 8 months of careful, growing love suddenly, unexpectedly crystallizing into this exact, terrifying, wonderful moment in a restaurant parking lot. Taeyang, she said, her voice unsteady. Is this actually happening right now? I had a considerably more elaborate plan, Taeyang admitted, opening the box. Revealing a ring that was elegant but understated, exactly the kind of thing he'd learned, over 8 months, she'd genuinely appreciate rather than something ostentatious. Dinner reservations, a specific song, a speech I've actually been rehearsing for 3 weeks. But watching you stand up to my mother tonight, watching you refuse to be tested without your consent, Watching you handle genuine pressure with more grace and fire than I've seen from most people twice, your experience in situations like that. He paused, something raw and certain entering his voice. I didn't want to wait for the perfect moment anymore. I wanted to ask you now. Exactly as we are, standing in a parking lot after the most stressful dinner of both our lives. That's not romantic, Taeyong, Abina said, though tears were already gathering, her voice thick with emotion despite the teasing. That's just logistics gone slightly wrong. I contain multitudes, Taeyong said. And Abina laughed, genuine and overwhelmed, the same laugh he'd fallen for 8 months earlier. Ask me properly, she said, since you're already doing this. Taeyong got down on one knee, right there in the parking lot, security discreetly maintaining distance a respectful 30 feet away, and looked up at her with an expression that carried none of his usual careful composure, only genuine, unguarded hope. Abina Carter, he said, 8 months ago, I sat in economy class specifically to watch you. And I overheard something that changed my entire understanding of what actually matters in this life. I've spent every day since trying to become someone worthy of the woman who taught me that. I don't have a perfect speech, and apparently, I can't cook jollof rice to save my life, but I love you more completely than I've ever loved anything. And I would very much like to spend the rest of my life proving that. Every single ordinary day, if you'll let me. Will you marry me? Abina, tears streaming freely now, laughed and cried simultaneously, the particular overwhelming joy of a moment she genuinely never expected. 8 months ago, watching a stranger observe her from seat 34C. Yes, she said. Obviously yes, Taeyong, get up before your knee actually gives out. You've been kneeling on concrete for a full minute. He stood, sliding the ring onto her finger with hands that were, finally, genuinely steady, and pulled her into an embrace that neither of them wanted to end. I have several follow-up questions, Abina said, once they'd finally separated slightly, laughing through her remaining tears. Starting with, does your mother know you were planning this? She suspected, Taeyong admitted. She may have specifically encouraged me to stop waiting, approximately 15 minutes ago. So this was partially her idea, Abena said, something delighted entering her voice now. She simply provided timely encouragement, Taeyong said. The ring, the decision, the 8 months of genuinely falling in love with you, those were entirely mine. I need to call my sister, Abina said suddenly, already reaching for her phone. She's going to lose her entire mind. Right now? Taeyang asked, laughing. Taeyang, I just got engaged in a parking lot after surviving a secret test dinner with your terrifying mother. Ajoa needs to know immediately, or she'll never forgive me. She called her sister right there, still standing in Taeyang's arms, and Taeyang listened, genuinely delighted, as Ajoa's shriek of excitement carried clearly through the phone speaker even from several feet away. She wants to know if you're going to wear a hanbok or a Ghanaian kente cloth for the wedding, Abina reported. Covering the phone briefly, she's already planning. Whichever makes you happiest, Taeyong said. Or both, if that's possible. Oh, he's a keeper, Ajoa's voice announced clearly through the phone, apparently having overheard. 3 weeks later, the engagement announcement made careful, controlled headlines, considerably warmer coverage than the chaotic scandal that had originally introduced Abina to public attention, this time framed accurately, respectfully, as a genuine love story rather than speculation and controversy. The wedding planning that followed brought its own particular chaos at Joa and Soo-jin. Against every expectation either family held, forming an unexpectedly formidable planning alliance that left both Taeyong and Abina occasionally genuinely terrified of what elaborate plans they might discover their mothers-in-law to be, had arranged without consulting either of them. They've apparently agreed on a 17-course menu, Taeyong reported one evening, reading a group chat message with visible alarm, without asking either of us. Ajoa mentioned something about combining Ghanaian and Korean wedding traditions into the most extravagant fusion ceremony this city has ever witnessed, Abina said, equally alarmed. I think we've created a monster by letting them meet. Should we intervene? Taeyang asked. Absolutely not, Abina said immediately. I value my life considerably too much to interrupt whatever alliance those two have formed. We simply show up on the day and try to look appropriately grateful. Taeyang laughed, pulling her close, genuinely, completely happy, in a way that had nothing to do with business success or careful strategy, and everything to do with an ordinary, chaotic, wonderful life he'd genuinely never expected to find 8 months earlier, watching a stranger hand out stolen chocolate on a crowded flight. The wedding, when it finally arrived 4 months later, was exactly the beautiful, chaotic fusion both mothers had promised, a ceremony that opened with a traditional Korean payback, honoring Taeyang's ancestors. Moved seamlessly into a vibrant Ghanaian kente-draped celebration, complete with drumming that had half the Korean business elite genuinely, enthusiastically dancing by the reception's second hour. And somehow, despite Taeyang and Abina's repeated, gentle attempts to simplify things, still ended up with the full 17 courses Ajoa and Soo-jin had originally, unilaterally agreed upon. "I told you," Abina said, watching from the head table as their combined families moved through the reception with the particular easy chaos of people who'd genuinely, unexpectedly become close friends over 4 months of planning. "We should have intervened." "We tried," Taeyang said, laughing, watching his usually formal mother currently attempting, with visible determination and considerably less grace than her business negotiations typically displayed, to learn a specific dance step from Abina's aunt. "I don't think intervention was ever genuinely possible." Abina's nieces and nephews, Minho, Yoon and Somi, also attended the wedding. Somi appeared at their table with the particular urgent energy of a child on a mission. "Uncle Taeyang," he announced, "your mom is really bad at dancing." "I'm aware," Taeyang said, watching his mother attempt the same step a third time with visibly improving, though still imperfect, results. "Is that okay? Should we tell her?" "Absolutely not," Abina said quickly. "Never tell a Han woman she's doing something wrong, Minho. Trust me on this one." Minho nodded solemnly, apparently filing this away as important life advice, before wandering off to rejoin the other children, several of whom had been formally, delightedly included in the ceremony itself. Somi as an unofficial junior bridesmaid, who'd taken the responsibility with characteristic fierce seriousness. Yoon carrying the rings with an expression of such intense concentration that half the reception had found it genuinely, tearfully adorable. Later that evening, once the formal ceremony had wound down into easier, more relaxed celebration, Taeyang found himself standing at the edge of the reception with his mother, watching Abina laugh with a cluster of flight crew colleagues who'd traveled considerable distances to attend. "I want to tell you something," Soo-jin said, "that I don't say often, and I don't intend to repeat." "I'm listening," Taeyang said. "Your father," Soo-jin said slowly, "married me for reasons that had considerably more to do with business alliance than genuine love, in the beginning. We built something real, eventually, over years of careful, deliberate effort. But I watched you today, marrying a woman who challenged me directly at dinner, who refused every convenient path towards simply pleasing this family's expectations, who built her own life and career entirely on her own terms before you ever entered the picture, and I understood something I don't think I fully appreciated during my own wedding. Decades ago." "What's that?" Taeyang asked quietly. "That the marriages built on genuine love, from the very beginning, rather than careful strategic construction afterward, carry a kind of foundation ours never quite achieved," Soo-jin said. "I'm proud of you, Taeyang. Not for the business empire, not for the careful, controlled reputation I spent years helping you build. For this. For choosing this, deliberately, even knowing it would cost you the easier path." Taeyang felt something in his chest tighten with genuine emotion, rare, unguarded warmth from a mother who had spent his entire life carefully, deliberately maintaining composed distance. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Now go dance with your wife," Soo-jin said, her usual brisk composure returning. "Before Ajoa decides to organize another surprise performance I haven't been adequately warned about." Taeyang laughed, crossing the reception floor toward Abena, who turned to meet him with the same warm, unguarded smile that had, 8 months earlier, first caught his attention on a crowded, unremarkable flight. "Your mother just gave me actual, genuine praise," he said. pulling her close as the music shifted into something slower. "About time," Abina said. "I've been working on her for months." "You have?" Subtly, Abina said, something teasing entering her voice. "I may have mentioned casually several times exactly how much your father would have loved seeing you this happy. I've heard she genuinely respected him." Taeyang studied his wife, a word that still carried genuine delighted disbelief every time he thought it with fresh appreciation. "You've been quietly managing my mother's opinion of our relationship this entire time," he said, "haven't you?" "I contain multitudes," Abena said, echoing his own frequently used phrase back at him with obvious delight, and Taeyang laughed, pulling her closer as they moved slowly across the dance floor, surrounded by two families who had, against every reasonable expectation, become genuinely, chaotically one. 6 weeks into married life, Taeyang and Abina were still navigating what Adjoa had dubbed, with characteristic bluntness, the great household merger. Abina's collection of Ghanaian cookbooks now occupying space alongside Taeyang's precisely organized business library, her flight schedule pinned to the refrigerator beside his own carefully color-coded calendar, and, most notably, an ongoing, entirely unresolved debate about the correct volume for their shared television. "You watch everything at a volume that could wake the entire building," Abina said, one evening, watching Taeyang settle in with a business documentary at what she considered a genuinely unreasonable decibel level. "I watch it at a volume appropriate for actually hearing the content," Taeyang said, entirely unbothered. "Your neighbors have filed 2 separate noise complaints. Those were unrelated incidents." Taeyang, one of them specifically mentioned a very loud documentary about supply chain logistics in their written complaint. Despite the ongoing volume dispute, married life had settled into something Taeyang genuinely hadn't anticipated, feeling not the dramatic, headline-worthy romance of their courtship, but something quieter, steadier, considerably more satisfying in its own unremarkable way. Abina had transitioned fully into her role overseeing crew welfare initiatives across the airline, the work she'd once done quietly, informally, now formalized and expanded with genuine institutional support, though she remained, characteristically, entirely unimpressed by the corner office that came attached to the promotion. "I don't need a corner office," she'd told the board, during her formal appointment, with the same directness that had once unsettled Soo-jin at their first dinner together. "I need a budget that actually reaches the crew members who need support, and considerably less bureaucracy standing between identifying a problem and actually solving it." The board had, somewhat to everyone's surprise except Taeyang's, agreed entirely. On a quiet Sunday evening, 6 weeks into married life, Abina found Taeyang in the kitchen again, a location that still, occasionally, produced concerning smoke situations, though his jollof rice attempts had genuinely gradually improved. "What's the occasion?" she asked, watching him carefully measure pepper with the particular focused intensity of a man determined not to repeat previous catastrophic failures. "No occasion," Taeyang said. "I simply wanted to cook for my wife on an ordinary Sunday." Abina felt something warm settle in her chest at the word wife, still delighted, 6 weeks in, by how naturally it fit into ordinary sentences. "Any smoke so far?" she asked, peering into the pot. "Minimal," Taeyang said with genuine pride. "I've reduced the pepper to merely double the recommended amount, rather than quadruple." "Progress," Abina said, laughing, settling onto a stool to watch him work. "I've been thinking," Taeyang said, stirring carefully, "about something." "That sounds ominous," Abina said, echoing words she'd said to him months earlier, in an entirely different, more dramatic context. "A permanent fund," Taeyang said. "For flight crew members, specifically something that covers emergency medical costs, childcare support during layovers, even continuing education for crew who want to move into other roles within the company. I keep thinking about how close you came to losing everything over your mother's medical bills, before any of this ever happened between us. I want to build something that means the next Abina never has to choose between caring for her family and keeping her job." Abina studied her husband for a long moment, something deeply moved crossing her expression. "You want to build this together." "Entirely together," Taeyang confirmed. "Your name on it as much as mine." Your judgment on every major decision, not simply my resources funding your original vision. Taeyong, Abina said, her voice thick with genuine emotion, this is considerably more romantic than the flowers or the jewelry or any of the grand gestures you keep insisting on making. I'm aware, Taeyong said, genuinely pleased with himself. I've learned, over the past year, exactly what actually moves you. She kissed him then, careful of the pot still simmering between them. Genuine warmth and gratitude and love tangling together in a moment that felt, 6 weeks into marriage, considerably more significant than any of the dramatic, headline-worthy events that had brought them together in the first place. Yes, she said, once they'd separated. Absolutely yes. Let's build it. The pot, forgotten briefly during the moment, began, predictably, to produce concerning amounts of smoke. Taeyong, Abena said, laughing, already moving to rescue dinner. The rice can wait, Taeyong said, though he was already moving too, both of them laughing as they salvaged what remained of dinner together, exactly the kind of ordinary, imperfect, genuinely happy chaos neither of them had expected, 8 months earlier, when a wrong bitter number and a stolen chocolate had first, unexpectedly, brought them together. 1 year after their wedding, the Carter Hand Foundation for Youth Transition named, at Abina's insistence, with her family name listed first, a small detail Soo Jin had initially questioned before ultimately, genuinely endorsing, held its official opening ceremony in a renovated building 2 blocks from St. Anne's, purchased and restored specifically to house the foundation's expanding programs. Sumi, now 13, stood at the podium beside Abina, having been asked, at her own insistent request, to say a few words as the foundation's first official youth ambassador. 2 years ago, Sumi said, reading from notes she'd carefully prepared, though her natural bluntness kept breaking through the formal language, a strange man showed up at our Saturday baking day looking. And I quote myself from that day, like a cat in a bathtub. The audience laughed, Taeyong included, watching his niece by marriage, a title none of them had fully settled on, though everyone had simply, naturally started using it to deliver her prepared remarks with characteristic confidence. I didn't know then that he'd become, basically family, Solmay continued. I definitely didn't know he'd marry Aryam Nuna Abina Nuna. I still get confused sometimes because there's apparently another woman named Aryam in a completely different story, who also worked for a rich Korean guy. Which is honestly a lot of coincidences, Somi, Abina interjected gently, though she was fighting laughter. Right, sorry, staying on topic, Somi said, entirely unbothered. The point is, this foundation exists because 2 people who didn't have to care about kids like us decided to care anyway, consistently, for years. Not just for one nice photo opportunity. That actually matters. So thank you, Uncle Taeyang and Auntie Abina, for being the kind of adults who show up. The applause that followed was genuine, warm, considerably more moved than the polite reception typical of most formal foundation openings. Afterward, once the ceremony had wound down into the reception, Taeyong found Abina standing near the building's newly installed plaque names of founding donors and supporters, though the largest, most prominent inscription simply read, "For every child who needed someone to show up." Consistently. Ordinarily, without needing recognition for it. You wrote that, Taeyang said, joining her. I did, Abina confirmed. It felt important to say plainly, rather than simply implying it through grander language. Taeyang pulled her close, watching the reception unfold around them, Somi holding court with several younger children, clearly relishing her role as the foundation's first ambassador. Yoon, now considerably less shy than he'd been 2 years earlier, helping serve refreshments with focused seriousness, So-jin and Ajoa, once again, deep in what appeared to be enthusiastic planning for something neither Taeyong nor Abina had been consulted about. They're planning something again, Taeyong observed. I've stopped asking, Abina said. It's better for my blood pressure. Should we be concerned? Probably, Abina said, laughing, but not tonight. Tonight I just want to stand here, with you, and actually enjoy what we built. They stood together for a long moment, watching the ordinary, warm chaos of a life neither of them had expected. 2 years earlier, when a wrong number and a stolen chocolate had first, improbably, changed everything. Penny for your thoughts, Taeyong said finally. I was thinking, Abina said slowly, about seat 34C. About how close I came to never knowing you were there, watching me, that entire flight. I was thinking the same thing, actually, Taeyong admitted. About how many small, ordinary decisions had to happen exactly right for us to end up here. Tell me honestly, Abina said, tilting her head up at him. Was all of it the scandal? The boardroom? My mother-in-law's little test actually worth it? Yes, Taeyang said simply, smiling, pulling her close as the reception continued warmly around them. I've known the answer since a stolen chocolate and a crying child on a crowded flight. 8 months, then a year, then considerably longer ago now. She laughed, genuine and complete, and together, surrounded by the ordinary, chaotic, beautiful life they'd built from an accidental collision of two very different worlds, they watched the evening settle into exactly the kind of unremarkable, permanent happiness neither of them had known. 2 years earlier, they were even looking for, if this story made you want a jollof rice recipe and a good. Cry at the same time, drop a comment telling me your favorite moment. Mine's the proposal in the parking lot. Let me know where you're watching from too. Subscribe for more stories about love that lasts long after the drama ends. See you in the next one.